Well, welcome everybody. We've got our fourth session now, although one of them was cancelled, so maybe it's our third session of Climbing Matters. We have with us tonight to discuss the issue of drugs in sport, not in a good way, but we've got two of the. We couldn't ask for two greater experts in our field to come and tell us about this than the CEO of Cricket South Africa, Andrew Breetzke, and we've got the CEO of Drug-Free Sport, SAIDS. So between the two of them, we really have all the expertise in this subject that we could hope for. I think that, you know, climbing is new to think about drugs in sport. We haven't really ever worried about it. I'm not certain about it, but as far as I know, it's mostly recreational stuff that's ever been caught. But still, we need to think about those things. And now that it's an Olympic sport, even your national championships and things like that, these are issues which become real. And yeah, I'd like to hand over to Khalid Galant and Andrew, and let them take it away, and let's chat about drugs in sport.
Thanks very much. Before we start, I'm the CEO of the South African Cricketers Association. That's the cricketers, not CSA. Please don't confuse the two.
We would be in good. We'd be in good space if he was also CSA.
Yeah.
I'll go and take a test just now.
Okay. Yeah. No. What have you taken? Drugs. Yeah. Khalid, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, thank you and welcome, and for inviting the Institute for Drug-Free Sport to a climbing event, education event. And from our end, it's a congratulations to climbing that you are an Olympic sport, that you participated in the Tokyo Olympics, and congratulations that South Africa sent two climbers to Tokyo. It was the first try, so we hope the next time we have better results. But again, congratulations. And as we discussed just earlier on, you are now in the, as Andrew said, the real sports world. You have a beautiful gym here. It's a recreational. It was a recreational area. It's now a professional sports area. You have a governing body. And with that comes roles and responsibilities, and I'll ask Andrew maybe to touch on that from both the athletes' perspective and perhaps the governing bodies.
Yeah, I think it is a feather in the cap that you're having these sessions and you proactively engage SAIDS before the team went to the Olympics, because either as a federation you get forced to do something about doping because you get positive tests, which is not the nice way of doing it. You don't want to educate on fear and, oh, what happened. Or you proactively say, well, now we're in, as Khalid said, the real world of professional sport. And there's an obligation on the federation and on the athletes that it's no longer just about your skill and your training and even your nutrition. You need to understand what doping is about. You have to understand what, in your context, the SAIDS code actually says about doping. You need to understand that there are 10 offenses. You need to understand about how a doping test takes place. And so if you want to be in that space of professional sport and go to Olympics, that's your real world. And I think that's probably one of the challenges you face as a chair, because as a chair of doping hearings, independently of SAIDS, is when an athlete sits in front of you, deer in the headlights, I didn't really know. I didn't understand that, or I wish someone had told me. And that's actually not a defense. And I think maybe, Khalid, probably one of the most important things to talk about in terms of doping is that if you are an athlete and you are in the testing arena in terms of competing at nationals and at international levels, there's this concept in doping called strict liability. You are absolutely responsible for everything that goes in your body. And you might say, but gee whiz, in South Africa, you're innocent until proven guilty type scenario. It doesn't work like that in doping. You are effectively guilty until you prove you are innocent. And there are very few, from a legal perspective, very few areas of law where strict liability applies. The other one's actually in medicine. If you're buying medicines, those pharmaceutical companies are strictly liable. But that's also quite a mind shift change for people, is And it's the starting point of the code, speaks about every athlete is responsible for what they put into their body. And we could be here for hours, and we will give you examples of what that actually means. But that is the starting point to understand that's your new arena, that's how you have to be careful. So with a number of young athletes who I engage with, specifically around swimming and those sports, you try not to make them paranoid, but you can't just go around and take a supplement and do this and get this medication, because you're responsible, and that's the starting point. And you can't leave it to the athlete alone. It's the federation's obligation to start the training, start the education, and engage with SAIDs, because actually that's a big part of your mandate, Khalid, is the actual education and training. They have to do it by law. And the fact that you guys are reaching out to them is the starting point of that.
Thanks. And, you know, just also not to scare you.
Did I scare them, you think? Yeah.
I'm a bit scared, since you just said what my responsibility is. With respect to education, it's not just about the dangers of drugs or doping, or you're going to get caught. The intent of education is not how not to get caught. The attempt of anti-doping education is about the values of sport. We have that little girl playing here, and she'll probably grow up to love the sport. But to understand that it's about, sport is about equal competition, protecting the rights of the athlete, allowing her to compete equally against someone from America that is, I'm just using America as an example, you know, that doesn't always, you know, maybe have access to better facilities, but she can train. And anti-doping is about the rules of sport. And it's not the one having not only better facilities, but also using other artificial means to achieve their performance or increase their performance or medals. So it's also about the values of sport, about fair play, about the ethics, why we love sport, why you are obsessed and crazy about climbing. He's about another sport, about cricket. Everyone, and as an anti-doping agency, we have jurisdiction over all sport. All sport in South Africa, sorry. We treat every sport equally the same. We will do a talk like this to SA Rugby, which we've done, to cricketers, and to climbing. So in our world, we respect that each competitors in their sport believe that that is the best activity, best thing in the world of sport. And we take it, we're sensitive to that, and that's why we treat everyone equitably along that.
I think, Khalid, an important point, just if people don't understand, is SAIDS, as the South African Institute for Drug-Free Sport, is created in terms of a piece of law. So it's a statute. So they're actually not just an organization that came about. It's created in terms of law. It effectively has to create in terms of the Sport and Recreation Act. And there are two bodies created in sport and recreation. The other one's actually boxing and SAIDS. So they have to report into Parliament. And if you're a federation in South Africa, you have to affiliate yourself with SAIDS. So that's where effectively their authority comes from, to be able to undertake the training, to undertake the testing throughout the country. It's not a voluntary association, oh, let's join. No, it's actually formally. And then above that in the world, there's the World Anti-Doping Agency, which is WADA, and they are obviously in control of the entire world, if you want to look at it like that. So every country has their, what's called a NADA, a National Anti-Doping Organization, and SAIDS is ours, and every country has their own. And there's a lot of cooperation between those bodies to actually make sure that there's a uniform global approach to doping, which is why when you see what happened in Russia and in other countries, it's obviously a big issue in the global doping world. But that's effectively where SAIDS sits. It's not just something that was created. It's got a specific legal structure. And that's important because it gives them authority. Yeah.
That what Andrew mentioned in terms of international collaboration. So when our climbers or are training in the US or live in the US, as with many of our cycling and cyclists and runners, we contact the US agency and they will be tested. So through us, by our US counterparts. And what that does is when you show up in Tokyo or in Paris at the next Olympics, when you start climbing, the guy or person next to you, you know that they have been tested. If you look, they've also been tested, not just because you in South Africa and we have a NIDO a year. So that is the intent of the international collaboration. So what can you do and what you cannot do? So first of all, what this question comes up invariably. I don't know why it's always in Cape Town, or maybe it's because I always speak in Cape Town. Marijuana and CBD. Let's get that. Let's get that out of the way. I think Andrew referred to law, and he spoke about strict liability. So the sports law and the civil law. So marijuana is still banned in sport. Marijuana has been legal or decriminalized in many other countries for years. It remains banned in sport. It's considered an illicit drug. So we don't use the word recreation. You mentioned it earlier. What she was doing, the little girl, that's a recreational activity. So we don't want to confuse recreational. We don't like to say recreational drugs. We say illicit drugs. And there's in terms of those that adjudicate, it's now treated as a substance of abuse, and so it gets adjudicated quite differently to a steroid, which is very strongly performance enhancing. CBD oil, it is permitted because the THC is removed from it, but CBD oil, just like supplements, operates in a very unregulated environment. And we have had athletes that have tested positive for THC, claiming they use CBD because some of the THC is not removed. So it is a risk. So unless you know the supplier, it is permitted. As you know, with the Tokyo Olympics, there is the issue of marijuana is being reviewed with the US sprinter that was tested positive during the trials and couldn't go to Tokyo and claimed she was using marijuana for emotional purposes. Whatever that is, it's not, the whole issue of marijuana is being considered differently in an anti-doping context. The concentration of marijuana has increased from previously. So you have to ingest a lot of marijuana nowadays on the day of competition to test positive. And marijuana is banned in competition. It's not banned out of competition. That is what I just said is actually meaningless because marijuana tends to stay in the body much longer. So you get a fatty like me, marijuana on a Wednesday, I can still test positive on a Saturday. A lean guy like Andrew,
thank you.
You can get away with even on a Friday, and just the way the substance is metabolized. So yes, society has deregulated marijuana, but it's still banned in sport. So how do you know what is banned and what is permitted? There is a list called the list of prohibited substances, which is published and comes into force on the 1st of January every year. You can go to our website, drugfreesport.org.za, and you will see it looks like, for some it looks simple, for some it looks complicated, but we also have a little search function. You type in, if you're at the pharmacist or someone gives you something, you type it in and it will come red, green, and give you an idea of whether it's permitted or banned, and also its status in South Africa.
That's important information, and it's not static. It's very dynamic. So every year it changes. So that's one of the, again, if you're in a sport and you're doing it at that level, you need to understand that this changes all the time. Even the marijuana, Khalid, over the years, it's changed so many times. In America, for a long time, it was, this must never be permitted. Whereas in South Africa, I chaired a number of cases where you're dealing with an athlete who the traditional healer has given flu medication to, almost like a med lemon, and there's always marijuana in it, and as a boxer he gets tested and tests positive. And the Americans can't understand that there can be a traditional medication with marijuana in it. So you probably find that will change, as it has changed now. I mean, you could effectively go down to a 1-month ban for marijuana if you go on from 3 months on a drug training course. But one of the mistakes people make is they fail to recognize that every year the list that comes out that Khalid's talking about actually changes. And I think the other add-on to that is if you are competing at that level where you can be tested, I might get criticized for this, but the days of going to your GP around the corner actually end, because it's a different type of medicine you need to understand now. And you need to start going to a professional in sports medicine who understands the code. Because when we chair hearings, an attorney chairs the hearing, someone like myself. Then I have with me 2 assessors. The one is an administrator, and the other is someone who specializes in the medicine of sport. Because that's the person I need to rely on to understand all the scientific names of what get put before me. And again, if you are competing, you need to be able to go to a medical specialist who can say, you know what, you are competing nationally, you could get tested, and you have flu, well, we need to be careful now. And that's off that, you know, if a doctor prescribes something to you, and you go and take it and you test positive, strict liability. You can't turn around and say, oh, but the doctor prescribed it to me. That's actually not a defense. So that's why it's so critical that when I say becoming an athlete at an elite level is not just about what happens here. That becomes part of your life, and it's a very big part of your life.
That what Andrew just mentioned with going to your doctor, if you can communicate to your climbers, you guys are now competing national colors, you go to internet, the first thing you have to do is let your doctor know, or go to, as you say, a sports medicine doctor. Many people are under the impression, doctors specifically, because they prescribe, because they're a medical professional, that you can take it, that it's permitted. There's a process that one has to go through. So let's touch on what you can take, although substances may be banned. There are legitimate reasons people may take glucocorticoids for asthma or for various other ailments. It's called the Therapeutic Use Exemption. If you go again onto our website, there's a nice tree. We're going yes, no, meaning what type of athlete are you? Are you competing at this level? Yes, no. Then it takes you there. Do you have to apply for a TUE? Basically, the output is, do I need to apply for a therapeutic use exemption now? Or can I apply for it retroactively? You don't have to apply for it immediately, and what is needed. Also, what substances qualify for a therapeutic use exemption. In 1st of January next year, there's some changes with glucocorticoids. Again, federations need to be updated, and athletes needs to be updated. So anything that's banned, you theoretically can take if you have a legitimate therapeutic use exemption. You have to jump through a lot of hoops.
Tell them about the hoops, Khalid. There are a lot of hoops.
So we went through a phase in South Africa where we had all these cyclists applying. I shouldn't probably have said cyclists. Where we had all these athletes applying for testosterone because someone said testosterone. Just tell your doctor that you have problems with fatigue or libido, and they're going to give you a testosterone patch. Well, it's banned, and being fatigued or having a low libido is not really a human right that is about surviving or not surviving. Just do less of what you're doing. So all those were denied, and basically the majority of therapeutic use exemptions that come through our door is for attention deficit hyperactive disorder, which is Ritalin, and again, there's specific hoops that you have to jump through, because it's obviously in a majority of your cases going to be adult onset. You can't just say, I want to take it. Actually, on that point, when we researched climbing, so when you guys we heard climbing is going to be in Tokyo, in our staff meeting, guys, do we know what is this? When we say, do we know what is this, we mean, what is the sport and what is the doping risks? What is the physiological aspects of the sport, and how does it manifest in terms of doping risk, low, medium, or high? So you take a substance like Ritalin, ADHD, it could be performance enhancing in a sport like climbing. So we're going to, we won't be any stricter with climbing. It's just that they will still have to comply with whatever the criteria is to get an exemption. But again, to your athletes, they may think, oh, I've been on Ritalin for a number of years. I'm a top athlete. I can keep taking it. No, you can't. You were, in the real sports world. So that, in terms of what is permitted in sport and what is banned, the list is updated, as Andrew mentioned, once a year. But if you go to our site, that list is updated every month. And that is when you're in the pharmacy and it says this cold or asthma medication or this hormonal thing, the brand, and it's particular to South Africa. You tap it in and it will give you. So that database is updated on a regular basis, and that is brands that are unique to South Africa, and will give you an idea. So you type in Panado, which is a brand. You don't have to type in paracetamol.
Is there a difference between females and males and also para-athletes?
In terms of the list,
sorry, can I just say that without the microphone, we won't get this on the recording. So maybe you can just repeat the question for us.
I'm just wondering if there's a difference for females and males on the list, if there are differences, and also for para-athletes, if there's a difference.
The list is very woke, it's gender neutral, but there are minor differences. Again, we've had, interestingly, the substance clomiphene, which is an androgenic substance, which is in the steroid family, is actually a breast cancer and a fertility drug, but more men have tested positive in it. And if you know something about steroid cycling, especially in bodybuilding fraternity, you'll understand why they take in clomiphene. So no, there's not a gender substances just banned for women or permitted for women, but that will come into play in terms of a therapeutic use exemption. With para-athletes, there are certain modalities that are permitted. The catheter, and obviously the athlete can prove, though a catheter is banned, but for a para-athlete it is permitted. But again, there are processes in place. But as far as I know, just offhand, there's no substance I can think of that would be specifically banned just for women or just for men. So yeah, I didn't quite know. Thanks for the question. That the list is quite woke. It's gender neutral.
I think the greatest irony of that question is often the positive tests, like Khalid says, it's males taking female drugs for reasons that we can get into. Just on the TUEs, I think one of the mistakes athletes make is they think, oh, here's a policy, we must comply with it, and we get a TUE, I'll go to my doctor, he'll say I should take this drug and I'll send it in. When actually there are many hoops to go through, because I've assisted athletes with it. There's a committee that reviews the report that your medical specialist has sent. And this committee is a whole bunch of specialists who are looking at it and saying, and the key issue is this optimum treatment for this person? Because if it's not, they're going to kick it back and say, well, actually, we don't think this is the optimum treatment. Not necessarily that it's incorrect, but it's not the optimum treatment that should be used, and we're not going to grant the TUE. And I think the levels, Khalid, are important. If you're watching a Springbok rugby player or a Protea cricketer or someone at that level, know that if they're taking any type of medication, they have to have a TUE. Their whereabouts, which we could get into, there's so many obligations on those top pro athletes that they have managers who are actually managing that for them, because it's such a big part of their life, as compared to athletes who are at a level now of national levels, etc. But too many people who come into that level tend to think, oh, it's just something I must read up and, oh, I'll do that, when actually behind the scenes there are committees looking at it. It's not easy. So again, make sure you're getting the right advice. And I think, Khalid, one of the other issues we should touch on is SAGE is a resource. Yeah. It's actually not there to be a policeman. My role is I chair hearings, and I'm, as Khalid says, I'm the bad guy who bans people. But SAGE is actually there to help you. They're not there to catch you. And even when an athlete does test positive, for example, a steroid, one of the processes that SAIDS goes through is to say, well, your sanction can be reduced if you sit down with us. Where on earth did you get this stuff from? How, et cetera, et cetera. So, and even if you say, I think I got it through supplements, they will help you test those supplements. They're not, I'm trying to say, Khalid is not the bad guy. Because some people tend to think, oh, SAIDS, we've got to be scared of them. They're actually there to assist. And they must be seen as a resource, not a policeman in the process. They do charge. They do take you through a hearing. They do enforce a ban. But that's actually probably a small percentage of your work now, if one's honest. Yeah.
Thank you.
We've got one more question here.
You just touched on supplements, and we were talking off mic earlier just about supplements and how unregulated it is. How does that play into this entire thing?
How many hours do they have, Khalid?
Yeah. So I would, well, I can say when I walked in here, one of the nice things that I saw, and again, kudos to you guys, that there wasn't a big supplements banner. You know, I go to quite a few CrossFit gyms with no success. But actually I just go there to visit, but it's all sponsored. You know, they have these big supplement banners and sponsors, and you know, CrossFit is going through a introspective phase over the last couple of weeks about doping and about testing, and they're going to have a challenge because the supplement industry is heavily invested and sponsored. They're going to have a challenge. Supplements are not all bad. I don't want to make it out to be like an illicit drug. It's just it's a huge risk for a professional athlete because you don't know, you know, what's in it. It's probably, I don't know if it's a good analogy. It would be like a professional athlete, you know, driving to the airport on their way to Tokyo but speeding without a seatbelt. Let's see what's going to happen. You know, so if you know, you're going to be as nervous to, you know, get and want to make sure you actually get to that point. And for professional athletes taking supplements, it's kind of that risk that they're taking. Again, referring to the Proteas and cricket and rugby players, the national federations will not give them free supplements as they did previously and accepted, you know, free product from sponsors or from supplement. The risks are too high because then the federation is held liable and can be sued. So it is a risk. Is there a place for it in sport? Could be for some of you athletes. The people, professionals you want to draw in now as you become a professional sport, Andrew mentioned sports medicine doctors. Now you need to also draw in some dietitians with sports experience. Not just your normal dietitian, but someone that's going to understand the demands of your sport, you know, how many hours they train, what do they need, what their nutritional demands are. So someone with a sports background. So it's not all bad, but it is high risk. And there are some sports supplements that have a lower risk. They are available, or they should still be available in South Africa. Okay. I know Discam had a quite an expensive program a couple of years ago. I'm not sure if it's still running, but
it's no guarantee.
Yeah, it's just you're just reducing your risks. Yeah. In other words,
I think the important thing to understand about supplements is, whilst we have legislation that governs food, and we have legislation that governs medicine, we don't have legislation that actually governs supplements. So we literally could sit here this evening, throw a few things together and ground some leaves out and put a label on it and go and sell it. It's not regulated. So studies that they've taken place in Bloemfontein, they did the study a number of years ago, where actually they just went around Bloemfontein and they bought supplements, and they found 25% of them contained banned substances that weren't actually on the labels. And I think it has improved because they've had to up their game, but again, there's risk, and on strict liability, you're responsible. I suppose the best story I have on supplements is about 2-3 years ago, I received an email, and it was, "Dear Sir," which was a good way for this person to start. It said, "My name's so-and-so, and I'm a Gauteng under-17 cricketer, and I've done a bit of research, and I see you're involved in doping, and you're involved in cricket. I'm looking to start taking some supplements because I need to lose a bit of weight and just get fitter. And given your expertise, can you please direct me in the direction of the supplements I should use that will be safe? So I wrote back to the young man and I said, congratulations for taking ownership of this issue, not just going to a shop and buying it. I said, but actually, save yourself some money. Go and visit a dietitian at Tukki's High Performance Center and actually get an understanding of your physiological makeup and your needs as a young cricketer. And to his credit, he wrote back and he said, okay, I'll do that. I forgot about it totally. About 7 months later, I actually got an email from his mother on the same home email address. She said, I was aware my son sent you the email, he told me. And I just want to tell you, we had 4 sessions with a dietitian. We've totally changed his diet. He's lost his puppy fat, he's stronger, he's healthier, and it cost us less than actually going and buying the supplements. So that's actually a great story. You've got to get to a dietitian if you're starting to enter this world. The going to a shop and asking an assistant, how do I bulk up? You don't know what you're going to get. And my take on supplements, Khalid, is, and this is rather cynically because I've done a lot of work in the schools and I see the trends, is the supplement market actually becomes a bit of a gateway to the harder banned stuff. And that's a problem. You start taking a supplement and you're working out and you're feeling better, but then it gets to a point where it's not really working and you go back and they say, well, try this. And this actually is something banned. And I think we've been around a long time together, Khalid and I. I worked out it's over 10 years. You're grayer than you were when I first met you. But there's the access to illegal drugs in this field in steroids it's so easy. And I think that is something that shocks people as well. And it's across all age groups, whether it's a Cape Epic 45-year-old male taking something, or whether it's a 16-year-old schoolboy. And we do, I think, Khalid, still have the record in the world, sadly, of the youngest steroid user who was a 13, 14-year-old girl back in the late 90s. Yeah. She was a 100-meter sprinter, and her father and her coach were pumping steroids into her. So we actually internationally don't have a great track record at age group levels either. So I've always seen supplements, the danger being, apart from a potential positive test, is actually when they stop working or don't work, you just up it. It takes you to another level, and that's when you start hitting the illegal stuff. Yeah.
So some of your viewers or athletes, if they listen to this, what Andrew just said, will probably say, what's doping? No one takes steroids in climbing, or none of us. And maybe 2021, why does South Africa have this, notorious record? Because there's this double-edged sword when your sport grows. Mm. So 30 years, 20 years ago, if you want to watch a rugby match, you have to go to the field on a Saturday morning and a couple of parents. Now you can watch it on SuperSport, you can watch it online. You see sponsors, schools have a branding on them, money's involved. You go to, as a social experiment, go to Craven Week whenever it's happening, or to the Coca-Cola Cricket Week, and you'll hear different languages in the spectators. There are scouts from all over the world. The stakes are high in those sports, and when the stakes are high, people are looking for the shortcut or not confident in their own abilities and looking for artificial means. So your sport is now being in the Olympics. I'm not sure if it will be in Paris, if they've changed it. So if you're going to be in Paris, you have 4 years. Mm. The stakes are high. So South Africa, I know America dominated the medals with climbing, but now South Africa wants a medal. France wants a medal. It's going to be a home turf. Other countries want medals. So the stakes just increased. So, for climbers to say, no, we don't dope, that's not part of our culture. Yes, it may not have been, when it was a recreational sport. It's now a professional sport.
And I think, Khalid, the important point is, you take cricket, for example, which I'm involved in. It's quite a low-risk sport from a doping point of view. It's quite casual how we play, if you think about it, compared to a high energy, which actually, if I look around me, and I did do a bit of research before I came here, and stimulants are an issue in this, because you can imagine the speed climbing you guys do, a stimulant is going to help you, because boom, you're out there and you're climbing up. And ultimately, steroid use similarly, the upper body strength, becomes important. So we know in rugby it's an issue, and I think rugby is still your highest number of tests you do is in rugby. And then even a school sport like water polo, where effectively that upper body strength becomes critical. And I can imagine on some of this climbing apparatus, the upper body strength becomes really critical. So it's not even if you take what Khalid has said about your sport is now entering a new realm. If people are sitting there saying, yeah, but not in our sport, actually your sport, it's a lot of ingredients for it to be there because of the nature of what your sport is, as compared to a more bowling, for example. It's not going to have number
Which
of...
we had a positive in bowling. Also.
Yeah,
the beta blockers are banned in bowling. That slows your heart rate, improves your accuracy.
Like for darts. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think with the split of speed climbing and the bouldering and lead climbing, we're going to see a whole different change in the sport. Speed climbing has not been very popular amongst the boulderers, for argument's sake, and a lot of the top speed climbers have been excluded because they're not really good at bouldering and lead. That's splitting now. We're going to be in 4 years' time in Paris. And the thing is going to change. But perhaps you'd like to just touch also on the process that people can expect. What we were chatting about earlier is quite fascinating. Just what can they expect when they do get tested? Because I think that's also something that we need to educate people as we go forward. But it is very interesting to hear what is going to happen when this happens. I mean, I can attest to the fact that when you arrived here before the African Championships, and I said, can I help you carry that in? And it was like, what? Don't touch. And I thought, okay, I'll just go stand over there.
Well, that's good to hear that our staff was...
No, absolutely. I mean, I was quite taken aback. I was just offering to help him carry his kit inside, and it looked heavy,
I'll start
but
answering that. I'll start because I'll let Khalid answer that. But I think what Khalid is going to tell you now about the process, again, it's not just, this is how it happens, you go and do the test. Every process he will talk about is critical, and if you as the athlete don't comply with that or comply with an instruction, that in itself is an offense. So it's not just, please go to the bathroom over there with the chaperone and give us a urine sample. There are elements of the process that if you object to or obstruct, that will in itself get you an offence. There are 11 offences under the code. And what Khalid will talk about now is critical that you understand it and you comply with it. There's no time to be bolshy here or have an ego, let me put it that way. Yeah.
Thanks. So the process is invasive, quite invasive. But what that I mean by someone has to witness you passing a sample from your body into a container, male and female. So it's male will witness a male, female will witness a female, below the knees, above the navel. So that's invasive. Professional athletes generally are comfortable with their bodies, but that is what you need to expect. We do have, again, a video that goes from the start. So what Andrew mentioned, in a hearing, we have to provide the panel who entered the station at what time. We have a register. So that's where our cooperation with the federation officials are important. And the fact that our staff said, no, please, I carry the bag, it's great to hear. Because 6 months later, there's a positive, this athlete is going to say, well, that federation official actually has a vendetta against me, and I saw him carrying the bag. Then now what? So that whole conspiracy theory comes into play. So yes, we are very strict about the setup and who can access it, and who, we document everything. And the process is, the urine sample process is invasive. We also take blood, and hopefully between now and Paris, we'll have a dried blood spot test. So we don't have to draw blood, we'll just do like a finger prick. But currently we do draw blood, and the climbers are in the risk category where we will be drawing blood from climbers. You will have an opportunity to hydrate, you have an opportunity to bring your coach or manager with to witness and to co-sign with you. There's a declaration form that you have to fill. You have to handle everything. We don't touch anything. So before COVID, we were already doing the social distancing with these things because it just that's just the way the system is. We never give you a sample kit. You have to select from a number. And you pass the sample, you seal it, you test that what you just did is sealed, and then it goes into a little security sealed container and off to Bloemfontein and analyzed within a week, and hopefully you don't hear from us, and when you don't hear from us, it's good news.
Yeah. And it's analyzed anonymously, obviously. It's just a reference number that only gets...
Actually, that's an important point that I often forget. The athlete signs a form, and we're actually moving into a paperless system to prepare our athletes for Tokyo. For Paris. In Tokyo, it was demoed with some sport, and it will be basically it's not the signing, the duplicate.
Okay.
So the adjudicating bodies won't also have to go through like, I can't understand what this athlete wrote or whose signature this is, because we've had cases where an athlete said that wasn't his signature. It was, but he said it was, and that just causes 3 hours of a discussion in a hearing that we have to now prove and get a handwritten expert. But it will be on tablets. And then what the email that you receive is your form, but what the lab analyzes is a blind sample. So they get the sample, it has the number. They don't know that it's they do know it's a climber, but they don't know who it is. And so they have to analyze the sample objectively. What are the purposes of that? So earlier on, Andrew mentioned Russia. So there's a context to that and why the sample is analyzed blindly. So that there's 3 parties. There's SAIDS, the athlete, and the lab. So let's say this is South Africa's top athlete, and you can put any name you want there. Can you imagine the fiasco if the top athlete tests positive? So I'll be pilloried in the media and whatever. So it's not in my interest to disclose that. So I want to cover it up because I know who it is. The lab doesn't know who it is. But how the system is designed is that the lab doesn't know who it is. When they input into the global database, which is called ADAMS, and it's an acronym, that result goes to WADA, and then we get the result. WADA also doesn't know who the athlete, because we have the data to reconcile the number with the athlete. The stopgap for that is that we cannot cover up a case, because eventually after 3 weeks, WADA will contact us as we see as a positive in your system. What's the status of it? And so that's why how the system works, the stopgaps that South Africa, not only South Africa, but any other country cannot really cover up the system. The issue with Russia is much more salacious and fun. So go read what happened in Sochi, and even on YouTube with weightlifting and Russia, and you'll see, like with anything, humans will try to collude and manipulate the system.
Khalid, another important point is and this is more athlete advice, when you go for that test, if you get selected for the test, that form that, thank you for digitizing it, because I've always battled reading that form when I'm chairing hearings. You give obviously a lot of personal details, but then you give a list of what you are actually taking at the moment. And the important lesson for all athletes is often you sit at a hearing and the athlete says, oh, I took some other supplement, or I took this, or no, I was using this type of inhaler at the time. And you say, but you didn't list it on there. And I forgot to list it on there. So again, when you reach that level of that you are going to be tested, you need to know what are you putting in your body. So when you do actually chair hearings and you come across athletes and they'll have 12, 15, they actually have a second page they go onto sometimes, especially if they're rugby players, of all the things they're taking. And they have to do that. My other advice and a lot of them are supplements, is if you do take supplements and you're at that level, you actually need to keep the container that supplement comes in and keep a little bit at the bottom, a centimeter of it. Because if you test positive later, SAGE will say, if you're going to claim it as a supplement, contamination, we will go and check that for you. I've seen a story of an American footballer. His garage is full of all the old supplement, and he's got them dates, so that if he ever did test positive, he actually said, well, these were the supplements I used. I can prove contamination, because contamination, if you can prove it, can get you a lesser sanction. But again, that's just the extent of the level. The other example I'd like to give just on that testing protocol, which is so important, is, I don't know if you recall, I did a case a few years ago. It was a female athlete at a SA Champs, and she got called to a test, and she went to the test, and she was very difficult in the testing, like, why should I be tested, etc., etc. When she went to actually pass the urine, she became difficult and sort of told the doping control officer to move away. The doping control officer said no, and then when she passed the urine, she then knocked it over intentionally. And she was charged with effectively tampering with the sample and got a 2-year ban for that. So it happens. I think she was the first tampering case we had at the time. It happens, and one has to be realized that every part of that process is critical. Sitting as an attorney who would advise an athlete, you need to hold SAIDs accountable for each and every step of that process. So if a doping control officer did actually pick up the container, the sample container, then that's a problem. They're not allowed to. You meant to do it. You take one sample, and you often hear of an A sample and a B sample. It doesn't mean you pass urine twice. It's one sample that you actually divide into 2 containers. And then if you test positive for the A, you've got the right as the athlete to have that B sample tested. So it's actually the same urine, but it's stored, and you can then test it later. So it's a significantly complex process, but it's a good process, and SAIDs are good at it. The doping control officers are good. Athlete needs to know his or her rights, but you need to respect that process, otherwise you could have a problem.
Just on the athlete's rights, and this is the advantage of the governing body, the federation officials understanding the process, because your role in the scenario when an athlete tests positive is not only to advise that athletes on his or her rights. Many times the federation officials either want to defend the athlete, or the athlete is out on their own. We don't want anything to do, you test, it's his business. But you do have a role. You have to ensure that the athlete is aware of the rights. We will inform the athlete also of the rights, but hold our feet to the fire. As Andrew said, did we do what we're supposed to do? We have to follow an international standard. In any way, was security compromised? That it could have been manipulated and cause the positive. So the role of the federation is not just hands off when an athlete tests positive. We invite the federation officials to sit as observers in hearings, so that you can see how they interact. But it's not about learning about the process during the hearing, but to ensure that the athlete is your member, it's not our member. To ensure that, guilty or not guilty, that the rights are respected and that we are following the procedures that we are supposed to be following.
We've got another couple of questions here.
If you're found guilty, is being banned the only consequence, or is there another consequence? And then my second question is, if it's a minor, I don't know, at what age do they leave being a minor in sport? I don't know. But if it's like a 13-year-old girl, am I as the parent liable, or where is the liability of it?
Well, I'll let him answer that.
The parents are always liable. You don't get away from that. I think the starting point is that in terms of doping bans, the ban is completely from the sport. All sport. You can't participate in any other sport. You can't be banned in cricket and go and play rugby, or play rugby and go and play cricket. You are banned from sport under the federations.
No coaching, no
teaching, can't do anything.
No administrative. No.
Wouldn't be able to come. It's not criminal. You wouldn't be allowed to come into this area because, as a banned athlete, because you can't participate in any sport in any capacity. It's very strict. Criminal prosecution would only happen if there's some illegality, and that could happen in
civil.
In terms of if you are dealing with illegal substances, which the steroids are. So often there are criminal prosecutions, but the athlete is done. There are thresholds, I'm going to get into too much detail, around 16 years and 18 years in terms of children, where effectively, and that's new, that's come in, where the
protected athletes.
Protected athletes, they're protected, and as such the process becomes slightly different for them as younger athletes, let me put it that way. There's still consequences, but they are regarded as protected athletes as compared to people over 18. Having said that, the tragic reality of South Africa, I'll give you an example. A school I assisted recently who informed the first team that they were going to test for steroids, come clean now, and one boy came forward and said he's taking steroids, and it was Dianabol, which is the steroid of choice for a lot of the schoolboys, and more worrying than that, he was actually taking a female oncology drug to counter the effects of the steroids, which were really pumping estrogen into his body. This is now a 16, 17-year-old. So on top of puberty, you pumping estrogen into your body, so you start getting breasts, your testicles start shrinking, but he was taking the oncology drugs to counter that. And now, so I think that the sad element is it's not just an adult issue. It's very much a issue for our junior athletes, and as Khalid said, our rugby players, I think the work SAIDS does at Craven Week is massive. And I have a little trick I do when I speak to parents, and they say to me, where on earth do I get these drugs? Where does my kid get these steroids from? And I go, on my home screen on my phone here, and let me just go into Google, and you can see I'm on Google, and then I type in Dianabol purchase. So if you were timing me, which I normally do at these presentations, and I say, okay, I'm on my Google page for Dianabol purchase now, and there are a couple of options here. I'll go to the supplement warehouse, which sounds promising. I see it's an American.
And they are not a sponsor.
Yeah. So they are. Dianabol is a little blue pill. Not that pill you've got, Khalid. It's another one. And I can buy it for $59.99. So if people again are timing me, I'm adding it to my cart. It's in my cart, but they've said, why don't you add, see here, the estrogen blocker. It's actually for $40. So they're actually giving me the estrogen blocker as well. I won't take that now, though. I'll just go straight out of here. Continue to the cart, and okay, $60 there. They're still saying I've forgotten the estrogen blocker. And I'm on checkout. So, sorry, I haven't agreed the terms and conditions. Okay, I'm on checkout. So I've just got to put my card in there, and it will be delivered to my house here. I've got to pay quite a bit of packaging from America, but you can get a lot from China.
You can get it in South Africa, sir.
You can get it in South Africa, yeah. You can go to one of those stores, sadly, and just ask the guy behind the counter who's looking over you, and you say, I'd like some Dianabol.
So you're probably wondering, why are we giving you this information that maybe athletes now can find? It's nothing for us to hide. It's out there. But what Andrew mentioned is many, almost all parents will ask, but how do they get it? And like anything, if you want it, you can get it. Anything illicit, I mean, we in South Africa, if you wanted ivermectin 6 months ago, you got ivermectin. And to give you an idea, I mean, we do drug seizures. We also work with law enforcement. We have raided gyms, much smaller than this, private gyms, that had quite a stash of steroids. And steroids are banned in a civil sense also, criminal sense, because they are scheduled drugs. But to give you an idea, we actually did work during a lockdown, and it was during level 4. We did a raid in Potchefstroom. And normally when we do a steroid raid, we'll get, as you mentioned, other gateway drugs. Most commonly is the Ritalins and methamphetamines, those type of drugs. This time around it was, and we also always get the sexual enhancement, male sexual enhancement pills. This time we did get quite over R1 million worth of various steroids, but there was more than R1 million of ivermectin. Again, if you want anything,
you can get it.
you will get it. That's just the way nature or human nature is.
And Khalid, last year I chaired a hearing, which was, I think, our first hearing of different type of synthetic steroids coming into the country. So the advance in the science on the type of steroids and the synthetic types, which means that the testing process is different in terms of how you test positive. So it's the advancement of that industry. It's not like it's static. It's almost a race between the scientists who are cheating and the scientists who are catching people. So it's not great for sport in that sense, but it advances at an alarming rate, which is why the list changes every year as well.
And there will always be at the end of each category and any other similar products.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so the question I have is back to the testing. What is the prevalence and what is the intended prevalence of testing at school level and national level before it gets international?
Can I start that one?
Yeah, if you understood the question.
I just think you need to differentiate between being in a federation and participating under the flag of that federation and being at school and playing school sport. There's a significant difference. If you're playing a rugby match at school, it's under the auspices, the control of the Department of Education. They control that. SARU, as South African Rugby, have actually got no authority over that event, which means SAIDs technically have no authority over that event, and that's a big debate and things we're changing with the Department of Education. So that's a big difference. But even if a boy could play a rugby match for his school team, and there could be no doping control because he's playing as a school. The next week he plays for Western Province Craven Week, different story. That's under the Federation of Western Province Rugby. That's under SARU. That falls squarely into Khalid's domain, and they will test that boy there. So it's important to understand that there's a big difference there, but I'll let you carry on with that.
Does that answer the question?
It does, but what is the prevalence? I mean,
what do you mean by prevalence?
Are we testing kids at a national level? I'm fully aware of it at an international level when we're competing against other countries. But as pro-tier climbers or as...
Well, in South Africa, I mean, South African athletes, junior, senior, are the most tested athletes in Africa. And it's also because we have such a diversity of sport, from climbing to rugby. And we have to, as I mentioned earlier, we respect every sport when they have that stature. How often we test, depending on the competition, the level of sport, whether the teams or the athletes are going continental or international. So there are various factors, but also the doping risk. So it's a cricket Coca-Cola week is tested very different from rugby Craven week. Swimming junior championships are tested different from rowing versus water polo. But we do test at the junior level. Yeah.
Okay, so junior level, and that also age groups different. So if we
Correct.
have under 13 who's going to compete in a world championship, they would be tested?
Correct.
And in our interprovincial competitions?
They would be eligible.
The word is they could be tested. It's probably unlikely given the level of competition, but they could be.
We will test, at the 13 if there's an issue going on. I mean, to be realistic, it's a funding issue, but I don't want to be sending my staff to test 13-year-old boys and girls. It's also very different from when we test adults. As I mentioned, it's invasive. You have someone witnessing you. With minors, we have someone witnessing the witnesser. So it's, we do it. That's what's required. It's part of the rules of sport. Very reluctantly.
There are two other elements that I think are important. SAIDS works on information that it gets, intelligence. And so it will go and test in areas where they're hearing stories, you're getting credible information that testing takes place, or a team. So SAIDS would come and test here at Western Province Climbing if a couple of people phoned up and said, you know what, something's going on there. and you would probably come and test here. I think the other thing to remember is testing isn't only linked to events. At the highest level, there's what's called whereabouts provisions. So our top athletes in the country, so that would be our Olympic athletes, our proteas, the top 18 protea players, all the rugby players at the top level, actually have to register where they are at any given time, 24/7. So if you're a protea cricketer and you were sitting at home and you say, actually, I'm going to go to Plet for a week, you actually have to register online that you're going to be in, because they can come test you wherever you might be. If you say, I'm going to go overseas for a month, then you need to register, because someone can come and test you overseas when you're there. So that testing happens a lot at that highest level. And that's obviously to stop historically what used to happen. You used to get a lot of athletes who would come to South Africa from Europe, and they'd go into the sticks somewhere and do their stuff, and they wouldn't get tested. They can't do that. And if you miss a whereabouts test, if you miss 3 in 12 months, that's an offence. And I've had a cricketer who went to practice one day and actually wasn't feeling that well, and the coach said, you know what, just it's so hot, don't burst a gut, just go home, let's chat. He was feeling nauseous. And at that moment, they came for a whereabouts test, and he'd gone home, and that was his first strike. He said, hell, man, I didn't. He said, you actually should have gone and let them know. I've actually gone. I'm not at training. So your whereabouts at that highest level, you said, well, I'm training on this day, I'm at home on this day, etc. Again, the point I made earlier, when you reach the highest level, it becomes a major part of your life. And if you ignore it, you're going to get into trouble.
So we had an athlete that wasn't even eligible to compete in the trials to qualify for Tokyo. It was the defending medalist, Luvo Muvhango, who failed his whereabouts. And I'm not sure if he would have qualified, but he wasn't eligible even to compete in the trials. And then the well-known, also a medalist Paralympic athlete, the tennis player, he got banned for 6 months. He also failed his whereabouts. So it's real, it happens. Yeah.
Which means if you reach that highest level, you need to have a management team around you, because that's actually, if you're a professional in the sport and you're dealing with the sport, that part of your life, you actually need someone to assist you. It's a significant responsibility. Yeah.
I've got another weird question. There's been a lot of this talk about microdosing, etc., with LSDs and stuff like that. Is that ever come up in
all the
tests? All the time?
We will catch you. We will catch you. And those that are we will catch you. We're caught. Again, there's a specific sport. I don't want to be like lambasting another sport federation at another sport federation's event. But there was a sport where microdosing in South Africa was rampant. We got information on it. It took us 2 years, 2 to 3 years, and we cleaned out national, international champions. So there's a urine sample and there's a blood sample. And we can detect certain substances on a microdose level in a urine sample, but with the blood sample, that's part of the arsenal in the blood sample to detect microdosing. And it's a program or system called the Athlete Biological Passport. So it's very different from a positive test. This is what you cannot have in your system had nandrolone positive. With the Athlete Biological Passport, it's a profile, and we're looking at how, different parameters in your blood, and to see that it's within normal limits of yourself. Your limits are going to be different to his, and that's how we can detect microdosing.
Now, I think one of the mistakes athletes make, Khalid, is that they underestimate the science behind the doping side of it. The biological passport has taken it to a new level, where effectively they're taking a picture of who you are biologically and measuring it over time, and then are able to see, hang on a sec, this is unnatural. You're not the same person you were biologically a year ago. You've done something in that period. And at the same time, people tend to think these tests, this isn't a test you just buy at a store. They're very scientific, and they pick up the minuscule amounts. So people need to understand how sophisticated the science is behind the testing process all around the world. Yeah.
And that's an important point, the difference between a test that we do, that a PathCare does, or that a self-testing buy at the discount. So speaking at a school once to an audience like this, we're 20 minutes scaring the hell out of the headmaster. Okay, we want to do some tests before SAIDS test us. So that's called screening. That's illegal. That's a doping offense. So now the climbers are watching us. Oh, some of them are nervous. Or you are protecting your sport. You don't want any positives. This is your sport. You don't want to blight on it. So you call all your Western Province climbers, guys, we're going to do a couple of tests and we're going to send it to Pathcare before SAIDS gets here for the regional or that. Not only will the athletes be banned, your sport will be banned nationally, internationally. It will go right up the ladder. That's called screening, and in the same, in terms of the code, in terms of manipulating or trying to beat the testing system with your innocence to protect your sport.
Good point.
Well, I think that was a very scary thought to end up on, but I'm kind of hoping that drug in climbing is not ever going to be a big issue for us. But part of the way we're going to ensure that is to listen to the expertise that we have had here. And I want to say a huge thank you to both Andrew and Khalid, just for enlightening us and scaring us and letting us know what we're in for. And I think that the whole climbing industry is going to professionalize, and we're going to see much more of this. And the more aware we are of all of these things, we've made arrangements already. I don't think we've got dates yet, but we've approached them to come and do some proper education with our athletes. And thank you very, very much for your time.
Welcome.
Huge thank you. It's been amazing, and I'm hoping that this will go out to the rest of the country as well. And let's keep it clean.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thanks.